So this is my video talking about my implementation of my logic pieces into FMOD. So I'll just go through this and show you bit by bit what I did to essentially program these how I wanted into FMOD. So starting with my shop music, as you can see I've got a marker here that's called outside, and this is essentially, if you just look here, these markers here are my locations. So the first thing I did was obviously implement my samples that I made from Logic. This is slightly different from my Logic sample because what I did was I cut the first verse and just doubled it because I wanted it to go on a bit longer, and I also separated them into sections. So I've got a little intro, kind of transition thing that I added. I added that to all of these, like little sounds at the start of the pieces that indicated a transition. I thought this would be a great way to really help me make really nice transitions. And I've got my actual intro music, my verses, and then straight into the outro. So anyway, what I did for this was I wanted this to play by default. So this is the default state. But say, for example, the player wanted to go to the shop. So he's walking about town, and then this music starts playing. But I then added a parameter called location, which when you change this, it would snap to these locations. Also note that I've looped this, so when it comes back to this, it plays that little intro, but as soon as it goes to this region, from there, it just loops this bit because I don't want it to play the intro over and over, the intro little sound over and over. So anyway, yeah, so say the player wanted to go to the shop. So this piece is playing. Turn this down so you can actually hear me. And now if we were to change the location, think of that as simulating the player moving. You can hear the music starts to fade out. And then the shop music starts playing. So all I did there was, you see this little transition region. I added this with, which is altered by my location parameter here. So all that essentially means is when the player, when the shop parameter is activated, then this is activated, the transition. So that's all that means. But I didn't want it to just snap immediately. So I added a bit of a transition, and you can see here I did a bit of a volume automation, which essentially allows for the fading out of wherever it last played. So you can hear that. I'll just turn it up a bit. So it plays and fades out, and then on the shop music I've done a similar thing, only it's the opposite. If I just zoom in a bit, you can see it's from this point it starts to get louder, so that fades out and then that fades in. That's all that is essentially. It's just a little transition that I made. And then so say we've now gone into the shop, right? The player is walking around the shop, so I'll play that transition again. Shop music fades in, and then we've got a little transition region here, similar kind of looping. I've also got tempo markers, by the way, just so the program knows what tempo this sets at. You can see that changes. The bars are shorter or longer depending on the tempo. So anyway, the player then has the choice to leave the shop. And again, we've got a similar kind of transition. The shop music would fade out, which is what you see on this little automation here. And then, if we go onto the roaming music, it fades back in. So we'll play the shop music again. And then this transition region here, and the fading happens. Lovely transition to the outside music. This was mainly inspired by The Legend of Zelda. There's not much interest in transition with the music, but when you leave and enter a different region, or something happens that activates the music. There's simply just a little fade out and then a fade in, and that's all I wanted. I wanted to keep it quite simple. So if we go on to this, that's our little transition from shop to outside, so I've labelled it there, and that is again depending on the parameter. So when outside is selected, this is activated, and that happens whenever it's in any of these regions here. So say the player is outside. If I just remove, yeah. So say the player's outside, and something awful happens, and he's encountered by an enemy. Well, that's when you start to play that, that's when the fret level parameter here comes into play, which I've got. I'll go into more detail about the parameters later, but if we set that to 1, which is not quite working, if we set that to 1, you hear a little sudden sound, which I made, I talked about on my Logic video. There's just a little staccato kind of beat there, which indicates that an attack is occurring, and that's inspired by Pokemon. When you're wandering and you come into contact with an enemy, there is like a very sudden like sound that indicates that, and that's what I wanted. But yeah, anyway, so we've gone from outside and we've encountered an enemy, then the fret music, the combat music comes in. So say now we're on a very low fret level, not much is going on, and this piece here is actually inspired by like Doom, the game Doom, where the music changes based on the fret level. So fret can be whatever you want. So say, I don't know, it could be maybe your health's low, or there's more enemies. In this, I kind of thought of it like there's more enemies, which is inspired by like Legend of Zelda, like there'd be more enemies or whatever, or how intense the combat is, for example. So anyway, as you can hear, that's my little fret level 1 combat music. Not too much, but it builds a lot of suspension. And then, when we go into fret level 2, there's a quantization interval. And then, when it hits bar 3, that bass loop carries on, you can hear it, but it adds another layer of music onto it. I'll just mute so you can hear me speak. Adds another layer of music onto it, which would indicate again that there's more of a fret level. But then again, so as that's playing, if we were to go to fret level 3, as soon as that hits the 3rd bar, there's another layer of music, which is great. So yeah, really interesting. And all I did there was I had little loop regions. So that loops as soon as the playhead comes into contact with that, it just loops that section, and then same with all 3 of them. And I've got little magnet regions. So what these do is essentially, if you play from anywhere outside of these regions, it will snap to them. But if you add parameters, so obviously I've made every single one of these are affected by my fret level parameter. So when the fret level is at 2, as you can see, this activates. When the fret level is at 3, that activates, and then the same with fret 1 there. So that's all that does. Whenever one of these frets are activated, the playhead will snap to the beginning of that magnet region. And that's how that works essentially. And obviously got quantization intervals on there of 3 bars. So basically whenever it hits the 3rd bar of this, it will snap as long as it's on the according fret level. But then say they're victorious and the fret level goes away, or they flee from combat, for example. Well, that's when the fret level could go back to 0, or the location could just be put to outside again. So if we play, and there's a little transition, and then it comes back out to outside music. So it's a very nice little way that works, and I've put that on and, so obviously they have to be outside, which they would be anyway, because I wanted the shop, there can be no fret level in the shop, enemies wouldn't be able to enter the shop, so combat can only happen as long as outside is selected. So outside has to be selected for that to happen. So all that really then needs to happen, since that's already on, is the fret level would need to be put back to 0. So as long as the fret level is at 0 from then on, it will go straight back to the outside music. So it's a very nice way of doing that. I've also added the low health sound into it that you heard from my Logic piece, and I'll show you how that works quickly. So again, we'll put the fret level to 2. You can hear, so this carries on through the whole thing, but you can't hear it unless the player's health comes down. So I will slowly decrease the health, and you can hear what happens, and then I'll explain it afterwards. So all I've really done with that, if we go onto these health parameters here, you can see for one that it's affected by health, but it's really interesting if I find the effects that I put into it on the combat rather. So on the combat music, there is a cut-off on a low pass, so that is essentially modulated. If we go into the modulator, so that if you look here, that's these numbers at the bottom indicate health. So when the health's at 100, so when it's from this point to that point, no effect comes in, so there's no cut-off. But as soon as it gets to about 25, that's when you can see here that when it gets to about 25, 30, you can see that's when the effect starts to kick in. So I'll put it to like 26, and the effect on the combat is, starts to filter a lot more, but as you get lower and lower, it goes more and more, and then eventually you hear that that beep of the health come in, and that is from this automation, so that when the health is up 20 or below, so as you can see, again, same kind of thing, these indicate health. So when the health is at 21 to 100, it's muted. It's the volume's all the way at 0. Well, all the way at the bottom. Sorry. But when it gets to about 20, that's when it snaps back up to its original point, so you can hear it. So that's essentially how that's worked. And now I'll just talk you very quickly through how my parameters work. So if I'll show you my health parameter first. So I've got this as a continuous parameter. This allows you to pick from any two numbers essentially and make a range. And I've set the initial value to 0 rather than being 100. So it can go from 0 downwards rather than from 100 downwards, sorry, rather than 0 upwards. And now my location parameter. If I just look at how this works, so I've got two labels onto that, which is outside and shop, which, as you know, are my two locations. The initial value is set to outside because that's where the player would be originally, and then that will change based on what the value is set as. And now my threat level. Sorry, my threat level is a discrete parameter type, which is very similar to the one I used on health. Only this allows you to just use fewer numbers rather than a percentage range, which is what the other one does. So this is 0, 1, 2, or 3, but the other one has other numbers in between, like decimals and percentages and things like that. So it works slightly different. So yeah, that's essentially how my whole FMOD piece works. As a little recap, I've got location that can be changed, so the player can be outside or in the shop, and the music then changes based on that. I've also got health, where a little low health sound comes in to indicate that the player's low on health, and I've got transitions for all of those that work really nicely and work in time very perfectly. And then I've also got a threat level, which can be reduced or increased, and then that changes the music as well. So yeah, that's my whole FMOD piece.